Hello, everybody. So I'm going to be talking about an act. I'm going to be talking about the ESSA, which is the Every Student Succeeds Act, which began with the civil rights era or movement in the 1950s and 60s. But at that time, it was actually called the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA. And so what we have today is called the Every Student Succeeds Act, but it's gone through three phases. So the first phase, we had the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which it was signed by President Lyndon Johnson in 1965. Part two, or the second phase of the act, was No Child Left Behind, or NCLB, which was signed into law by George Bush Jr., President George Bush, in 2002. And the ESSA, or Every Student Succeeds Act, was signed into law by President Obama in 2015. Each phase has brought about a different idea, or it had a different perspective. So with the policy in 1965, the ESEA, signed by Johnson, the idea was funding. Schools need more money. And so they just give money to schools, basically. But they didn't necessarily have accountability. So the money maybe was just being wasted. People didn't really know what was going on. And that was what No Child Left Behind was meant to address in 2002. So you had the federal government with kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to education. And that's what led to high-stakes testing, and people were really unsatisfied with that. And then with the ESSA, which was in 2015, what they were trying to address was the achievement gaps overall. And so that was signed into law by Obama in 2015, as I mentioned. And some of the goals with that were high academic standards for college and career, statewide assessments that measure student progress. It invests in innovations and interventions, and that led to some flexibility with things like specific programs being created in certain neighborhoods that could better meet the needs of the communities. A high quality preschool, although that may or may not have been something that has succeeded. And then expectations for positive change in the lowest performing schools. And so some of the positives from, let's see here. Yeah, so some of the positives, I found some positives, comments from people that work in education. And this one here, Louisiana State Superintendent, Assistant State Superintendent. One thing that she said was that it allowed them to create a pilot program to fundamentally overhaul Louisiana's assessment system. From another woman in Wyoming here, the Wyoming Superintendent of Public Instruction, she stated that it allowed them to adopt an equity indicator that gave them an opportunity to reveal inequities. And then other people in education, this woman here, National Indian Education Association, so she stated that before, with No Child Left Behind, they didn't really have a say. As I mentioned, is a federal policy, is kind of one size fits all. Everybody kind of has to just follow the same rules. So it doesn't allow for flexibility. But with the ESSA, it allows for flexibility. It gives more people the chance to talk, and that's how she felt about it. And she stated that it gives tribes, or Native American tribes, a seat at the table, so a seat at the discussion table, and allows them the chance to speak up. And then this principal here in Hyattsville, Maryland, she stated that there's definitely been more transparency. So transparency has been a big thing. So some of the issues with some of the other, or specifically with No Child Left Behind, was that as I mentioned, it's a one-size-fits-all approach. It led to too much testing, and so schools were really teaching to the test, which obviously there is still that going on, but now there's more flexibility in terms of how testing proceeds, and instead of just one method. And with No Child Left Behind, it led to school districts finding or trying to find ways around the rules. So just teach to the test, just make sure that people, can succeed, even though they're not necessarily succeeding. Some criticisms of the ESSA is that, and I got these from here, 74 million, is that just three criticisms from them is that implementation has been uneven across states, which I think is to be expected. So I think the idea is to give states more flexibility, but also ensure that every state is doing well. So how do you do that? Another complaint number 2, was not enough information about the interventions or outcomes. So they may have interventions, but they're maybe not tracking information or providing as much information as they would like. And number 3, hugely varying results across states, as I mentioned. So some states might be doing very well, whereas other states are doing quite poorly. So that's going to be it. Thank you very much. And I chose this policy, by the way, because obviously it's a huge thing. It affects the entire country, and it is something that will probably change again at some point in the future. And hopefully the education system gets better, continues to get better. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.